all episodes on BBC iPlayer.
Have you ever stayed in an aluminium house before?
I've never even seen one before.
I nearly did, but my plans get foiled.
Join Grado and a panel of expert judges on the search for the ultimate getaway.
I wasn't expecting this.
This is quite exceptional. Some might say a little bit wacky.
Hell of a glamping pod.
Welcome to my house. What do you think?
You wish.
You won't believe it.
Scotland's greatest escape. Press red for all episodes on BBC iPlayer.
We have live Scottish football for the Youth Cup final on BBC Scotland as Rangers play Aberdeen Wednesday at 6:55.
Well, we both like travelling a lot, so we watch
Race Across the Road.
Race Across the World.
It's quite good. 4 celebrities from the UK race across the world.
We kind of related to that because there's a son and dad in it as well, and and they were saying things to each other that we said.
Yeah.
Exactly the same.
Yeah, they're both kind of bond on travelling. It's a common interest.
Yeah, it kind of brings us together when we're watching something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now on BBC Scotland we join Graham Stewart with all the latest news on the 9.
After a year in charge, Humza Yousaf resigns as First Minister. During a media conference, he tells reporters he'll carry on until a successor is found and says he underestimated the level of hurt by ending a power-sharing agreement with the Greens last week.
While a route through this week's motion of no confidence was absolutely possible, I am not willing to trade my values and principles or do deals with whomever simply for retaining power.
Here in the studio, we'll look at who could replace him with Kate Forbes and John Swinney, potential candidates. And we'll be joined by political commentators Shona Craven and Katrina Stewart throughout the programme.
Coming up in tonight's sport, we'll hear more from the nominees for the Scottish Premiership Player of the Year award, and we'll be joined live by one of the players from the Championship-winning Dundee United side as the Tannadice club secure a return to the top flight.
Welcome to Holyrood at the end of a dramatic day in Scottish politics. After a weekend of fevered speculation, just after noon today, Humza Yousaf confirmed to a room of journalists, advisers and family that he would be standing down as First Minister. He said he had clearly underestimated the hurt he'd caused in ending the power-sharing agreement with the Greens last week, and that repairing the relationship across the political divide could only be done with someone else at the helm. His decision comes just over a year since he took office, and it now leaves the SNP looking for a new leader again and the country a new First Minister. We'll have all the latest reaction to today's news, but first, with the story of the day, here's our political correspondent, Lindsay Bewes.
Mr Yousaf, are you resigning today?
Questions about Humza Yousaf's future had been mounting for days. This morning, he left his home in Dundee to announce his resignation. The media gathered at his official residence in Edinburgh, where he admitted the way he ended his power-sharing deal with the Greens had been a fatal mistake.
My hope was to continue working with the Greens in a less formal arrangement as the SNP moved into a new phase of minority government. Unfortunately, in ending the Butte House agreement in the manner that I did, I clearly underestimated the level of hurt and upset that caused Green colleagues. For a minority government to be able to govern effectively and efficiently, trust when working with the opposition is clearly fundamental. And while a route through this week's motion of no confidence was absolutely possible, I am not willing to trade my values and principles or do deals with whomever simply for retaining power.
Facing defeat in a confidence vote later this week, Mr Yousaf opted to jump before being pushed.
I've concluded that repairing our relationship across the political divide can only be done with someone else at the helm. I have therefore informed the SNP's National Secretary of my intention to stand down as party leader and ask that she commences a leadership contest for my replacement as soon as possible.
The personal impact of the end of his premiership was clear.
I am in absolute debt to my wonderful wife, my beautiful children, and my wider family for putting up with me over the years. I'm afraid you will be seeing a lot more of me from now. You are truly everything to me. And although, of course, as you can tell, I'm sad that my time as First Minister is ending, but I am so grateful, I'm so blessed for having the opportunity that are afforded to so few.
And with that, Mr Yousaf's time at the top is coming to a close.
It was an emotionally charged resignation from Humza Yousaf, accused of a breach of trust and poor political judgment. His successor will now face the challenge of building enough support in Holyrood to govern.
The problems began for Humza Yousaf when he sacked his junior partners in government, opting to end their deal before Green members voted on its future. Relations had strained over watered-down climate targets and the response to a review of gender identity services for children, while some within the SNP harboured longer-term concerns over Green influence in government on issues such as trans rights. Angered by their dismissal, the Greens refused to back Mr Yousaf in a confidence vote. Their support now depends on the direction of the new First Minister.
It is entirely up to the SNP to decide who they want to lead their party. It's for them to decide what kind of party they want to be. Do they want to continue to be a progressive party? Do they continue to want to make income tax fairer? Do they continue to want to work for the climate and nature emergencies? Or do they want to take a different direction? And that is up to them to decide.
Mr Yousaf's last hope of staying in power was the Alaba MSP Ash Regan. Her party boss claiming talks took place in an early morning phone call.
The reason he didn't do a deal with Alaba is there were forces within his own party who stopped him doing it. Let's call them the old guard.
With senior SNP figures describing a deal with Mr Salmond as impossible, the government said the call was simply a courtesy. Opposition parties say the First Minister's resignation is not enough.
It's a mess of the SNP own making, of Humza Yousaf's own making. He took the decision to end the Butte House Agreement. I told him not to go back into it. I urged the SNP when Nicola Sturgeon resigned that they should give up the Greens in that coalition government. They have been bad for Scotland.
I think it would be completely unacceptable, untenable actually, for the SNP to just impose another unelected leader on this country. That's why we believe we should have an election.
I think this will be another First Minister without a popular mandate. We need to go back to the country, the people that sent us to this place, and ask them for new instructions.
Amid the criticism, there was some sympathy. Posting on social media, Nicola Sturgeon says she knows what a wrench it is to step aside, adding Humza Yousaf has conducted himself with grace, dignity and integrity. It's farewell from Scotland's sixth First Minister. Over a year in office, his party now seeking a replacement much sooner than they'd expected.
Lindsay Hughes with that report. Well, our political reporter Jenny Davidson is with me now. Jenny, after all that went before, after the speculation across the weekend, was this outcome inevitable?
I think, Laura, it was inevitable. It was unavoidable by the time we got to today, and how quickly things have changed since last Thursday. If you think back to Thursday morning, Humza Yousaf sounding very positive, talking about a new start for his party as he ended that Butte House agreement with the Greens, but things unravelled very rapidly from there. He found himself facing 2 votes of no confidence, one from the Scottish Conservatives in him personally as First Minister, another from Scottish Labour in the Scottish Government as a whole. And then it turned out that he had fatally misjudged how the Scottish Greens would react to ending the Butte House agreement. They said that they had lost trust in him, they'd lost confidence in him, they would vote against him in a confidence vote. That left him in the situation of only having one option, and that was perhaps doing a deal with the single Alapa MSP, Ash Regan. She set out some of the things she would like to discuss with him. But over the weekend, it became increasingly clear that that kind of deal would be too unpalatable to many in the SNP to be doing a deal with Alapa, which is, of course, led by Alex Salmond. That left Humza Yousaf by today with only 2 options: to wait until he was pushed or to jump on his own terms.
Well, we know that politics moves pretty fast. Let's talk about what happens next. What should we be looking out for now?
Well, Humza Yousaf's speech today has essentially fired the starting gun on a new SNP leadership contest. It's important to note that he hasn't actually stood down as First Minister. He's announced he's going to. There's been a bit of talk about 28 days to find a new First Minister, but that's 28 days from when he actually resigns, which is when he gives his resignation to the King. But he said he'll stay in place until his successor is found. Now, we don't yet know the details of this new SNP leadership contest. We'd be expecting to hear from the party within the next day or two. They were pretty quick at reacting last year when Nicola Sturgeon stood down, and if we take that as a pattern, it was about 6 weeks between her announcing her resignation and Humza Yousaf being appointed. I wonder if they might want to speed that up, given both the circumstances of his resignation and also the fact there's a general election coming up very soon. They need a new leader in place. Of course, if there's only one candidate, there would be no leadership race. There'll be a coronation rather than a contest. So we'll see who puts themselves forward for that. Still the matter of those 2 votes of no confidence. Unless the parties withdraw them, they'll go ahead probably on Wednesday, but they're now no risk. Humza Yousaf has kind of preempted the issue with that. The Greens are now going to abstain, so it'll be a chance for opposition parties to air their views, but no threat to the SNP or to Humza Yousaf himself.
Lots to talk about, and we will be getting into all of it tonight, but for the moment, thank you very much, Jenny Davidson, for your thoughts tonight. Well, earlier this evening here at the Scottish Parliament, I spoke to someone who is at the heart of the government Humza Yousaf is resigning from, his Deputy First Minister, Shona Robison. I started by asking her what it was like being with him as he announced his decision this afternoon.
Well, it was very powerful, emotional. I think he did it with great dignity in a very difficult day for him and his family. And I think it's the mark of the man that he did that. He reflected a lot on the events leading up to this, but also his experiences as First Minister and the honour that it's been for him to serve, and also some reflections on where he thought things should go next.
OK, let's turn to what comes next. Who comes next? First of all, are you running?
Definitely not. I am getting on with the job of Deputy First Minister and, of course, Finance Secretary. There's a lot of work to be done over the next few weeks, so definitely not.
OK, good clear answer then. Who are you backing then?
Well, I'm not going to back anyone for the reason that I don't think I should. I think we should let the party decide. I'll have my own views, but I think it has to be someone who, first of all, can unite the party, take forward the priorities, but also, and this is the tricky bit, reach across the Parliament. The Parliament is a Parliament of minorities. The SNP, of course, has been in minority government more than any other form of government, but the Parliament is a bit of a fractious place at the moment, and I think someone who can reach out and try to perhaps reset some of that relationship. That's a two-way street, though. It would require the opposition parties to also respond to that way.
Could that uniting force then be John Swinney? He is one of the names that says he is actively considering the position, as is Kate Forbes.
Well, look, as I say, I'm not going to endorse anyone. What I would say is, well, I've worked for many years with John. He is very experienced, has a lot of skills and talents, but ultimately this will be for the party to decide that who at this appoint, they believe would be the best leader of the party and, of course, our candidate to become First Minister, should Parliament approve that.
In some ways, it doesn't matter in the sense that whoever is coming into the job and you face the same political arithmetic, they're still going to have to do a deal with the Greens, for instance. Will that work?
Well, I think it will be a different set of relationships. So there are many issues, of course, where we would continue to work with Greens on a day-to-day basis around the climate and many other policies. But I think there are many other areas that there is some consensus across the Parliament, and we need to try and bring some of that out. So a good example that's coming up, of course, is the legislation around the post office to get justice for our sub-postmasters and sub-postmistresses. So there are issues where we can unite as a Parliament and speak with one voice, and I think the public actually quite like that.
Just briefly, if you can, how harmful do you think this instability is for your party heading into a general election year?
Well, look, we need to get our act together, clearly, and as quickly as possible, and making sure that we can hit the ground running in that general election period is going to be very important, because we have a really important prospectus to set out about what we think is best for Scotland in terms of its journey forward, and we are uniquely placed to be able to put that case of what is best for Scotland. So we need to get our act together, we need to get out there, and I'm sure we will be able to hit the ground running by the general election.
That was the Deputy First Minister speaking to me a little earlier. Well, Humza Yousaf has spent just over a year in Bute House as part of Nicola Sturgeon's government. He held prominent roles, including as Health Secretary during the pandemic. The BBC's Kirsten Campbell looks back at his political career.
Humza Yousaf made history when he became Scotland's youngest First Minister and the first Scots Asian to hold the role. But he's had a turbulent time in office. He'd only been in post a few days when police searched the home of his predecessor Nicola Sturgeon as part of their inquiry into the SNP's finances. He's had to ditch controversial policies like the bottle deposit return scheme, and he's lost a court battle with the UK government over gender recognition reform.
Humza Yousaf's supporters say he's shown great resilience in carrying on for so long in the face of so many challenges. His critics say he simply wasn't up to the job.
During the leadership election, even his colleagues questioned his record in government.
When you were Transport Minister, the trains were never on time. When you were Justice Minister, the police were strained to breaking point. And now, as Health Minister, we've got record high waiting times.
He was victorious then, but he's been on the back foot ever since.
As the continuity candidate, what he essentially has done is continue with the same failures that his predecessor had in not really getting to grips with the state of the economy in Scotland, with the health service, with drug deaths, with the housing crisis. He didn't have his own agenda, he didn't have his own vision, and he didn't seem to want to change tack, and that was a major problem for him.
It was the Iraq War that inspired Humza Yousaf to join the SNP as a student. He'd concluded that only independence would stop Scotland being dragged into an illegal conflict. And during the current conflict in Gaza, he's won praise for highlighting the suffering of the Palestinian people and for showing solidarity with the Jewish community. His friends say he retains a passion to help those in need, here assisting Syrian refugees ashore in Greece when he was International Development Minister. A career politician who's had his ups and downs, his decision to sack the Greens looks like a misjudgment that's cost him dear.
He seemed to be a conciliator, a mediator, a different kind of leader to Nicola Sturgeon. And I think that's an extra reason that this is a really disappointing end, because first on the council tax, when that was suddenly plucked out of a hat without consultation, and now with the sudden agreement, end of the Bute House agreement, those have been non-mediated, not really very conciliatory, look, I'm pretty tough, really stances. And I have to say, I wonder who's been advising him.
Humza Yousaf represented the country at the King's coronation. Now he will submit his resignation to the monarch.
Goodbye, First Minister. Goodbye, First Minister.
His career as First Minister over, Humza Yousaf will follow in the path of many politicians before him. and spend more time with his growing family. Kirsten Campbell, BBC News, Holyrood.
Goodbye, First Minister. So glad that you could come.
Well, that is all from us here at a rather damp Holyrood tonight. It is now back to Graham in the studio for more analysis and discussion, and of course a look at just who could become Scotland's next First Minister. Graham.
Laura, thank you. Yes, we're here in the warm for the studio. We're going to take a look at who could replace Humza Yousaf shortly. But first, I'm joined by Shona Craven, a columnist for The National, and Katrina Stewart, the political writer at large for The Herald. It's all been happening so quickly over the past 24 hours. Shona, do you think his resignation was inevitable?
No, I don't think it was inevitable, and I think he would have survived the confidence vote, but obviously that would have been reliant on Ash Regan's vote, which I think he could have obtained fairly easily, but in his resignation speech he suggested that he didn't want to do that. We're hearing sort of mixed messages. It depends how much you believe Alex Salmond, that he was still trying to secure that vote in the early hours of this morning and didn't want to go, but obviously he's made the decision that that's what needed to happen.
It is fascinating, isn't it, that Alex Salmond, for a brief period, looked like he, and in particular Ash Regan, could be kingmakers, but suddenly they're out the picture now.
Alex Salmond is obviously a very, very savvy political operator, and it's not like him to overplay his hand, but he perhaps did in this instance. I think it would have been very problematic, very difficult for Humza Yousaf to have any kind of pact with Ash Regan and have this suggestion that Alex Salmond was in the background pulling any strings, or I saw someone allude to a hand on a trapdoor, which is quite a nice analogy to explain it. But I agree with Shona. I was quite surprised by the resignation. I'm not a betting person, but if I had been putting money on it, I would have thought that Humza Yousaf might have held on at least until the 11th hour before the confidence vote, but he's obviously decided that this is the best way forward for his party and perhaps also for the Parliament, looking to try and move this very messy situation forward.
What do you make of the tenor of his speech? It was very emotional at times, but also he didn't come across as bitter in any way.
No, he didn't, and he absolutely put his hands up and said, I think it was the right thing to do, but I went about it the wrong way. And I would agree with Leslie Riddoch that I would be asking who had advised him to do it in that way, because he's not someone who I see as someone who wants to look like he's being strong to the point of unkindness, and he obviously did just underestimate what the response would be, and I think advisors probably have to bear some responsibility, but he took full responsibility himself. I really thought it was very sincere when he said this has been such a huge privilege. He didn't seem bitter that he was feeling that he had to leave, and I think he is a party man and is acting in the interests that he sees it of his party.
Katrina, was it somewhat ironic that Humza Yousaf, when he took the leadership, he came across as quite a consensual politician, good at relating to people, speaking to people, and yet when you look at the way he treated the Greens, it's like he kind of lost that touch.
Yes, and this is something that's quite interesting, because when there is talk of Humza Yousaf's legacy, people tend to scrabble around to try and come up with something that they might offer for that. But what they do say is that he's a really nice guy, he's very charismatic, he's very personable, and people like him. But he has been accused of not being strong enough, of not being firm enough, of not being able to unite the party behind him. And so I think in this instance, he's attempted a firm power play and it's just gone wrong. But it's been interesting speaking to people in the SNP who are very much saying this was Humza Yousaf's decision on his own, distancing themselves from giving any advice and sort of pushing him out a little bit. There was a sort of sense that he was being hung out to dry very slightly, and nobody wanted to take responsibility for having upset the Greens.
Well, Shona and Katrina, stay there. We will return to you later on in the programme. So who could replace Humza Yousaf as First Minister and leader of the SNP? Well, two early contenders for the job could be the former Deputy First Minister John Swinney and the former Treasury Secretary Kate Forbes. I spoke to our political correspondent David Wallace-Lockhart earlier.
Well, Humza Yousaf said that politics was a brutal business when he stood down today, and he's got a point, because as soon as he went, we started talking about who might come next as SNP leader and First Minister. One name that's in the mix is John Swinney, former leader of the SNP back in the early 2000s when they were in opposition, former Deputy First Minister, of course, to Nicola Sturgeon. Lot of colleagues publicly calling on him to take up the job, and we got to him today. He said it's something he's thinking about.
I'm giving very careful consideration to standing to be the leader of the SNP. I've been somewhat overwhelmed by the requests that have been made of me to do that, with many messages from many colleagues across the party. So I'm giving that issue very active consideration, and it's likely I'll have more to say about that in the days to come.
So that's John Swinney there. Another candidate sensible to talk about, or potential candidate, is Kate Forbes, who of course came very close to winning the leadership against Humza Yousaf last time. She's seen as being on the more socially conservative wing of the SNP. She's rebelled a bit while Humza Yousaf has been party leader. She spoke out a few times. She's concerned the party hasn't been paying enough attention to rural Scotland in recent years. We haven't heard from her today, but we have heard from some supporters of hers, one being the former Cabinet Secretary Fergus Ewing. He says he thinks John Swinney represents continuity, whereas Kate Forbes, who he thinks will run, he says represents a fresh start.
Humza was very dignified today. I take my hat off to him, but it just hasn't gone well. And when things go badly, it's time for a change. And the time for Kate has now come.
So, David, if John Swinney and Kate Forbes do both run, what sort of contest are we looking at?
In some ways, you're not looking to something a million miles away from when Humza Yousaf and Kate Forbes ran against one another. Actually, if you look at who's backing who, it feels like quite similar camps are already forming. Look, John Swinney is seen as that reliable, perhaps slightly elder statesman of the party who's held a number of important positions, but he is open to that accusation of being somewhat of the continuity candidate. And some are feeling that the SNP at the moment requires quite a radical change, a shift in direction while it's facing a difficult time, and that perhaps the person who was Deputy First Minister to Nicola Sturgeon doesn't represent the right person to do that. That being said, he does perhaps come with a certain gravitas, a certain experience that others in the SNP don't have. If Kate Forbes does run, who does have significant experience, let's remember she was Finance Secretary under Nicola Sturgeon. If she does run, I think we can hear from her what we've heard much of over the past year or so, which is that she thinks the SNP has to move away from certain social issues, such as discussing gender. She made no secret of the fact she'd like to see taxes lower in Scotland and more focus, like I said earlier, on more remote rural areas of Scotland. So remember, the last contest got quite bad-tempered. It's possible if there's a contest between John Swinney and Kate Forbes, it could be a bit more civil, but it will once again shine a light on some of these divisions within the SNP.
David Wallace-Lockhart speaking to me a little earlier. Now, ultimately, whoever takes on the role of First Minister will need some kind of cooperation with one of the other political parties as they try and lead a minority government. Well, we'll hear from the Greens shortly. But first, I spoke to the Conservative Deputy Leader, Megan Gallagher, and asked if she was delighted by Humza Yousaf's resignation.
Well, the Scottish Conservatives have shown this week to voters right up and down the country when we said at the last election that we would be a strong opposition to the SNP in Holyrood. We have delivered on that. And now what you've seen is the First Minister resign. I think he has realised that he had to resign. I think he jumped before he was pushed. But ultimately, the reason that we brought forward the vote of no confidence was because the buck stopped with him. But let's not downplay the situation at all. We still have an SNP government who will push through, in my view, reckless policies that will have detrimental impacts on people right up and down the country. So the Scottish Conservatives will now focus their attention on making sure that they don't put through reckless policies and turning our attention to the next election.
I was about to ask, what's the point of this vote of no confidence next week? Because he is going, so it's kind of redundant, isn't it?
Well, we're keeping it in play just now to see what happens. I thought the First Minister was very vague in terms of his speech today, in terms of the processes that will be set out following his resignation.
So it's up to the party, isn't it?
We do need to wait and see what happens, but we are keeping it in play just now.
But it's a party issue how they elect their new leader. It's nothing to do with you.
Well, ultimately, the buck stops with the First Minister, and we don't know how long he is going to remain in post for. So that is why we are keeping it in play just now to see what the process will be following his resignation and how long he intends to stay in post for.
Looking to the future, are there any circumstances in which you would do some kind of deal with a future SNP government, even if it is just supporting certain policies in return for maybe policies you'd like to see put forward?
Well, I can't see that happening because every SNP leader who has stepped forward makes sure that independence is page one, line one, to quote the current First Minister, the outgoing First Minister's own words. So I can't see that happening because independence obviously is a huge issue for my party. It's a huge issue for the SNP party. But there has been occasions where in the Scottish Parliament, if we do feel a policy is a good policy, we will of course support it. However, whilst they're putting through reckless policies such as gender recognition reform and other ideological policies such as those, we will be the strong opposition.
Well, it's interesting you mention those policies because, say, for example, Kate Forbes became the next SNP leader and First Minister. Is she somebody you could work with constructively?
Again, going back to what I said previously, given Kate Forbes, we've seen Kate Forbes in a leadership contest before, of course, but she has also prioritised independence above.
But hold on, the SNP have always prioritised independence, even going back to 2007 when the Tories did deals with the SNP back then. You know, if Annabelle Goldie could do it back in 2007, why can't you do a deal now that might be in the interest of the Scottish people?
I think the SNP has moved significantly on since 2007 to the party that they are just now, and that's why I don't think that we can support them. They are the party that has caused severe division in our country. That's not something that the Scottish Conservatives support. We want to see a country that's, you know, prosperous, that thrives, and one that is not soaked in division.
Would you support an election?
Party. Well, we'll need to wait and see, of course, because there will be a general election, and you know who knows whether there will be a Scottish.
Well, talking about a Scottish election
or not. So yes, you know, we relish an election. I'm certainly looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to getting out when candidates are selected. And as I said, you know, there will be seats right up and down the country. It's a straight fight between us and the SNP, and we're focused on people's priorities, where the SNP are only focused on themselves and division.
Megan Gallagher, thanks so much indeed.
Thank you.
So that's where the Scottish Conservatives stand on the SNP leadership race. But what about the party that was, until days ago, a partner in the Scottish Government? Scottish Greens co-leader Patrick Harvie joined me here in the studio, and I asked him whether he was satisfied with Humza Yousaf's resignation.
No, I don't think anyone should be happy about what's happened over the last week or two. It's been disruptive, it's been chaotic, and I think a great many voters are probably a bit sick of that. They get enough of that from Westminster politics. We don't need that kind of instability in Scotland.
You got what you wanted?
No, what I wanted was what I had. And I think everybody who wanted a progressive, pro-independence majority government had that with the Butte House Agreement. We were working through that together. And yeah, I think we've lost something really important. I think it's deeply regrettable, the decision that Humza Yousaf made last week, and I think it is to his credit now that he's taken personal responsibility for that and made the right decision today. But no, I wouldn't say that anyone should be happy with this outcome.
Do you sense a change in mood among SNP ministers and people in the party? You had Dean Blackford the other day suggesting that there should be an apology. Do you think there's a sense of sorrow over what happened?
Yeah, I think there's some of that. I've certainly heard those kind of comments personally as well as publicly from some in the SNP. And I think from my point of view, you know, the reaction to all of this is also more in sorrow than in anger. You know, some of us were pretty angry last week at the height of all of this. But you know, as those feelings subside, you know, there is still a human impact to this. And I think we should think about that as well in relation to anyone who takes on a job like First Minister that has a huge human impact. I wonder if you can
mend bridges now with a new leader, say that's John Swinney, for example. Could you do some kind of deal with him?
I want to reinforce that, as with last year, we're not endorsing or nominating or proposing any particular candidates. That's entirely
You're ruling out certain ones. You don't want to do deals with Kate Forbes, no, that's for sure, isn't it?
I think we will say very clearly about the values that we can work with, not individuals. But The reality is that in the past, it has been possible for stable minority government to work. It doesn't mean that any two political parties always agree on everything. For example, in the period of minority government, I think it was the first period of minority government, there was one budget that fell because the negotiation with the Greens didn't work. Actually, on some of the heat in buildings work that we've still been progressing.
Just give us an idea of how
but
some
that didn't mean that the government fell. It didn't mean that there couldn't be continued constructive dialogue.
But how does that work exactly? I don't understand how. I mean, a lot of people watching will not understand the intricacies of how Parliament necessarily works. You've ruled out another Butte House agreement, and obviously the SNP wouldn't want that.
Well, I don't think either party is in a position to say let's go back to what there was before. I think the trust that was broken there has been really, really serious, and I think we now need stability in Scottish politics. We need to return to a stable government, but a stable minority government can function. It has done in the past, and Greens stand ready to play our part.
So there could be a situation where you say, look, if you give us some environmental policies that we like, we'll support you in return on other issues.
It's not that transactional. It shouldn't be that transactional. It should be about genuinely seeking what common ground there is, pushing each other out of their comfort zone a little bit where you have to, and simply being opposition when you genuinely don't agree with the direction the government is taking.
Do you feel like the most powerful man in Scottish politics just now? I know you're not a minister any longer, but in a sense, do you not get this sense that you are directing the future direction of the SNP and who might be leader?
Well, I mean, I think that's all very good for sort of newspaper sketches or cartoons. I'm not even the most powerful person in the Scottish Green Party because we're a democratic party. We take these decisions collectively, whether within our parliamentary group or in our wider party.
Patrick Harvey, thanks so much indeed.
Thank you.
OK, let's get the thoughts of our panel. Shona, it's interesting John Swinney's name suddenly being pushed forward as a potential new leader. Why do you think that is? Is it because he's an anyone but Kate Forbes candidate?
I think it's because he's seen as a safe pair of hands. He's someone that people know and are familiar with. It is a little bit peculiar because he seemed to have been fairly clear that he didn't want such a big job.
He didn't stand last time, did he?
No, he didn't stand last time. I mean, his name was mentioned this time last year or slightly earlier, and he basically said he wanted to spend more time with his family, and he didn't want to be First Minister. So it does seem like people have been trying to twist his arm to become First Minister at this difficult time, and that, you know, perhaps he's a bit reluctant but feels that that's what the party needs. There were a lot of younger names mentioned with less immediate name recognition for the public, and a lot of those people now seem to be backing John Swinney, possibly not wanting what they see as quite a difficult job, even if they do have long-term aspirations to maybe lead the SNP.
Katrina, I cheekily said to Patrick Harvey there that he was all-powerful because he was essentially influencing who will be the next leader of the SNP. Is that, though, to a certain extent true in the sense that John Swinney could work with the Greens in a way that perhaps Kate Forbes wouldn't be able to? We kind of know that anyway. The Greens have kind of ruled out Kate Forbes. But do you think that's where the differences lie?
I thought Patrick Harvey's tone there was quite interesting because he's managing to be both angry and disappointed all at once. But I think he's maybe sort of using a bit of false modesty there to understate just the sort of influence that the Greens are having at the moment. Whoever was going to take over from Nicola Sturgeon was going to have a really, really impossible job. So you have to have some sympathy for Humza Yousaf, that he's been in that position and he's had all of these hangovers from the previous administration to seek, whereas I think whoever takes over from him is going to have an easier job in bringing the party behind them, because if the chaos continues, if the sort of narrative of splits and divisions continues, then the SNP is going to be in a really poor position with regards fighting the general election and then further down the line the Holyrood election. So I think whether it's Kate Forbes or whether it's John Swinney, they're going to have a bit of an easier time. But I think they maybe have to be a bit bold and go down the Kate Forbes route rather than go for this safe pair of hands continuity candidate option.
Do you think, Shona, it'll be a coronation, or do you think, you know, Kate Forbes and John Swinney will stand?
I can't quite see it. I suppose I've just got visions of Kate Forbes standing there. John Swinney failed on this, failed on that. I just can't see that. But we know what she's capable of in a leadership
Is that because
contest.
he's such a respected
Yeah, I think that would
figure?
be... Yeah, I mean, not that Humza Yousaf wasn't obviously very well liked and respected, but I think she probably learned from that maybe she went a bit too far. But I just can't really see it, especially there's just been so much support for him so quickly. I think she has to be seen to be ready at any point, but I don't know if she necessarily sees herself taking it on yet. But she wants everyone to know that she's still there and she's still ambitious and wants to be First Minister.
I wonder, Katrina, will that disappoint many in the party? People like Joanna Cherry, for example, who would like to see the party take a different direction, particularly on gender politics. But do you think John Swinney would unite the party, or do you think there'll be Kate Forbes supporters out there who'll be very unhappy?
I think one of the things that's really important here is that the SNP cannot be seen to be a one-trick pony. So there has to be speculation over who is going to come next in order to give the impression that there is a pool of talent to choose from. So I think if they go immediately with John Swinney, which I don't think there will be a contest, I think it will be more of a coronation, and I think it will be John Swinney. But I think they have to have this back and forth. But Kate Forbes has a lot of support in the last leadership contest. She was very popular with the public. And, you know, we remember that the numbers in the end were quite close between she and Humza Yousaf. It wasn't a one-horse race by any manner of means. So, yes, there will be great disappointment if Kate Forbes doesn't become the next First Minister. But, she's not going anywhere. I think she will be First Minister at some point.
Right, we'll get some final thoughts from you at the end of the programme. But in the meantime, what do the all-important voters across the country make of today's news? Our reporter, Katrina Renton, was out and about getting reaction.
For the last year, Humza Yousaf has been First Minister, but he's represented the Glasgow Pollock constituency since 2016. At lunchtime, as he announced his resignation, we asked local constituents their views about his time in office.
What do you think about Humza Yousaf resigning as First Minister?
I don't really think that he should do that because he's done a lot for Scotland. He's doing the best for Scotland, so he should reconsider.
I don't think he was the man for the job, to be honest. Full of promises which never transpired, but then that comes with quite a lot of the ministers that take office, so...
We vote SNP, but I don't think he's been a very good First Minister anyway, besides not being in local, so...
He's done nothing for us, absolutely nothing. He's done no bad, but the biggest majority of people will want him out anyhow. That's a certainty, you know what I mean? But
I'm sorry to see him resign. I thought he had a lot still in him to give. In his time in office, I've met him in the hustings and he came across as being really good. He knew his brief.
It's probably a good thing, to be honest, and better for the Green Party, but I don't know. I don't know. Politics today is just madness.
Closer to Humza Yousaf's family home in Dundee, voters there had a similar mix of opinions.
He's had a very, very hard time since he came into the job. And I think it's made it very difficult now for the SNP, full stop.
Well, I wasn't really all that surprised. I think the wheels have been coming off for a while, so I think it's probably it's time to go, but I don't know about the chaos that ensues, who's going to take over. So
sad to see Humza go, but there'll be somebody else in the background that's coming up. Now, whether it's going to be someone from Westminster, or whether it's going to be someone from within the party, or someone that's unknown yet, I'm sure that they'll get back on track fairly soon.
In the islands of Orkney and Shetland, people reflected on the news.
Surprising, and I hope whoever replaces him can do just as good, or if not a better job than he did at the helm and running the country.
I think it's the best thing that could ever happen. I think he had no regard for Orkney and Shetland at all.
He just wasn't the right person for the job. He's basically taken Scotland from up here to down here.
I thought he was actually fairly competent. Never been a fan of the SNP, mind you, but I don't know quite who will take over, and it will make a difference, I suppose, to what happens in Scotland.
In the Highlands near Inverness, thoughts were turning to what happens next. Some want to have their say and go to the polls.
Obviously, election
because he was never brought in. The next new one has never been voted in, so as should be, yeah.
I think it's time to sort of see what the population think of the last few years where we've had misgovernment, mishandling of just about everything under the sun, roads, transport, ferries.
I think an election. I think an election. There's been too much, on Westminster as well as here, too much shuffling around.
Personally, for him, it's quite a sad event, but it couldn't have gone on the way it was going with indecision all over the place. It's not satisfactory.
That's what some of the voters think. Now, as much as we love talking about politics in this programme, Amy, it's great.
You love sport more.
Yes, just for once, something a bit different.
I'll give you a wee breather for 5
Yes.
minutes. Jim. How's that? Hello there. It is that time of year when awards are about to be dished out. And today we've found out that these 4 players, there we are, the big reveal, are up for the Premiership Player of the Year. Rangers duo Jack Butland and James Tavernier, along with Celtic's Matt O'Reilly and Hearts captain Lauren Shanklin, have been nominated for the PFA Scotland Prize by their fellow players. Let's hear from them all just now.
All swung in, O'Hara's header, and then Butland's.
Well, it's been an enjoyable year. Yeah, it means that you've done something right or performed well, so it's a nice feeling to have, and yeah, a bit of tough competition, but it's enjoyable. We've put ourselves in a position to achieve some great things, but that is all we've done. We've put ourselves in a position to do so. We all know what it's going to take and what we have to do to get over the line and get what we need.
Decent ball in for Matt O'Reilly!
It's been really fun, and I've learned a lot, to be honest, just because, I don't know, when you're doing well, naturally there's more noise around you as well, so I've had to manage things on and off the pitch more, and I think that's made me grow quite a lot as a person. There's a lot of trust in everybody. We've got people like James, Cal and Joe who've obviously been around the block numerous times, and they know what is required in these moments, and of course we've got a manager who's been here as well this time, so I think put all those together, you're in quite a good place.
Back to Shanklin!
I've been one of the mainstays in the team. Hearts obviously helps it. You're playing every week and you get that recognition at a big club, and I've done just concentrate on my football and tried to keep my form going for last season as well. Goals has just been in the right position, and I've always kind of had that knack for being younger. Goal scoring's always been a good part of my game, but there's kind of other parts, as you say, people are looking for me to go and improve, but I've just looked to add that. I've played slightly different roles for Hearts at times as well, position wise, and I've probably just added to my game all round, and it's just all came together.
Tavernier!
I always try to improve my whole game. I'd say I'm never perfect in any area. You can always work hard on every single aspect of your game, so that's it, just all the finer details and working hard, and it obviously helps scoring a lot of goals and getting a lot of assists. We've really went at leaps and bounds from where we were to where we are now, and the way we've improved as a team and as a club. So yeah, we can't think too far ahead. Like I said, it's the most important thing is this weekend, and we've obviously got to concentrate on that and try and win.
To the Championship now, and Dundee United are heading back to the top flight after they secured the title on Friday night with a goalless draw against Airdrieonians. The club have bounced straight back to the Premiership after a year in the second tier and close out their season with a home clash against Partick Thistle on Friday night. And I'm very pleased to say that United midfielder David Wotherspoon joins us. David, congratulations. How does it feel to have finally secured that promotion?
Yeah, obviously it feels great. I suppose we done it the week before, but to make it official this week was a great feeling and a long coming.
Yes, you've plenty of experience. We know that, David, in the top flight with the likes of St Johnstone. Just how big a challenge are you expecting on your return to the top flight then?
Yeah, I mean the championship was a real tough challenge for me personally, but for Dundee United Football Club, it was their goal was to get back up straight away, and not many teams have done that in the past, and it's a great accolade for them to manage to do that. But the excitement starts now, and it's preparation for next season, and I think all the boys, all the staff, the club itself, the fans, all looking forward to it.
Yeah, we're just seeing some of those celebration scenes with all the fans on the pitch. Safe to say for you personally, David, it was a bit of a stop-start season, wasn't it? Some injury problems, but it is yet another trophy for you to add to that growing collection. How do you just assess your season? How are you feeling physically at this point?
Physically, I'm feeling great now, but I mean, the past sort of 12 months have been very strange. I've been used to getting up and going to work like normal, but it's been a tough year for me and my family, and luckily we've had a great support around us to help us through it, and my wife's been right by my side, pulling us through the hardship of it. But it's been a good year for me as well, because it's opened my eyes to things, and I've got to look forward to next year now as well, and in the Premiership. So it's been all worth it in the end.
I love that. A patient wife, key to the success as well. Jim Goodwin said that he wasn't going to be analysing that performance on Friday too closely, as I know there were some celebrations over the last week. What was it like just being able to actually enjoy that success with the players after what's been a really successful season?
Yeah, it was great. It was such a great feeling. I know the fans get overexcited and want to join in the celebrations, but hopefully this Friday they can stand and watch and let us really enjoy it together, and let us have that moment, because we've thoroughly enjoyed this season and getting the championship sealed now, and we want to celebrate with them and our family and friends. So hopefully we can do that in big style on Friday.
Absolutely. I am sure you will enjoy it when it comes. David Wotherspoon, thank you for joining us on The Nine this evening.
Thank you.
Well, let's head from the Scottish Championship to the English Championship now, where Leicester City can clinch the title tonight. And it could be very fitting that the man at the heart of their famous Premier League title win back in 2016 could be the man scoring the all-important goal to send them back there tonight. Jamie Vardy, with a bit of a scruffy finish, but one he certainly enjoyed, and why not? And he got his second of the night early in the second half. Wout Faesi saw his effort cannon back off the post into the path of Vardy, who made no mistake, but certainly could have with that finish. It is approaching full-time there, and it is now 3-0, so the title pretty much wrapped up for Leicester tonight. To snooker now, and John Higgins is aiming for a place in the quarter-finals of the World Championship. He's resumed his clash against Mark Allen tonight, and what a tight contest it has been. The Wizard of Wishaw was trailing by 2 frames against his Northern Irish opponent, and in the 19th it was perfectly poised at 46 apiece, but Higgins took to the table and tucked away the crucial pink to decide it and reduce the deficit to 1 frame. It's currently 11 frames all, a dramatic ending in store in the first of 13 encounter, and you can watch it all on iPlayer and on the BBC Sport website. And Graham, just before I go, there's been a bit of a nervous wait for Scotland fans over the last 24 hours or so. What looked like it could have been a potentially serious knee injury for Scott McTominay, but he has just posted on social media this evening. I think we can take a quick look. Yes, that it is not as serious as he thought it was going to be. He overextended and he hopes to be back on the pitch soon. Wrap those Scotland players in cotton wool, is what I say, until they get to Germany.
Yeah, fantastic. Amy, thank you for that. Let's take a look at some of the day's other news now. And the Foreign Secretary, Lord Cameron, has urged Hamas to accept a Gaza ceasefire offer from Israel. He told a World Economic Forum meeting in Saudi Arabia that the conflict in Gaza wouldn't end until Hamas had released all the hostages taken on the 7th of October last year. Lord Cameron said all the eyes in the world should be on Hamas today. The Irish government says the Prime Minister's plan to send some illegal immigrants to Rwanda is leading to a rise in asylum seekers crossing into the Republic from Northern Ireland. It wants to send them back, but the UK says it won't accept any asylum seekers returning from the EU via Ireland. And the National Crime Agency has issued an alert to hundreds of thousands of teachers across the UK about the growing problem of financially motivated sexual extortion, known as sextortion. Parents and carers are also being urged to better understand the online blackmail, which is affecting an increasing number of teenagers. OK, so what can we expect from the weather in the coming days? Christopher Blanchett has the forecast.
Good evening. We've certainly had some rather cloudy and wet weather across the country today, with outbreaks of rain working their way northwards. This is the culprit, an area of low pressure, and you can see the radar on the chart there, so you can see the progress of the rain through the course of today. And it's still with us into this evening and for the first part of the night, but generally tending to peter out, so with some clear skies developing through central and eastern Scotland. The wind's easing down as well. They have been blustery at times today. Not as chilly as recent nights. Temperatures there in towns and cities 5 to 8 Celsius. To tomorrow, and we start the day with some sunshine in the north and the east, but then the cloud building from the south with outbreaks of rain pushing their way up the western side of the country across the Hebrides. And we'll start to see some brighter skies developing in the east. So by mid-afternoon, it's an east-west split. Some lovely sunshine for the likes of Edinburgh, Dundee and Aberdeen, but you can see behind me cloudier conditions with some outbreaks of rain. It's generally mild for all, 15, 16 degrees, and winds largely light inland, a little more of a breeze around the North Sea coast in towards the Northern Isles, so a cooler feel here. As we head in towards tomorrow evening, we start to see that rain disappearing, but we then start to develop an east wind, and that will bring some rather mild air. The mild air mass coming over cold seas will lead to some mist and murk, some har around eastern coast. So whilst Tuesday is bright and sunny in the east, from Wednesday onwards, we change that, and it's the west that will have the best of the sunshine. The east will have cloud with some low cloud and some rain at times. And in the sunshine in the west, we're looking at around 18 or 19 Celsius. Contrast that with the east, much cooler, much greyer. And a similar sort of picture, really, as we head through towards Thursday. Once again, in the west, 19, maybe 20 degrees. In the east, it will be cooler, cloudy with a few showers. And a similar sort of east-west split in terms of temperature, at least, on Friday. 20 degrees in the west, cooler in the east, cloud elsewhere with 1 or 2 showers at times. That's the forecast for now.
OK, let's come back briefly to our top story tonight. Humza Yousaf has resigned as Scotland's First Minister. He'll continue in the role until a successor is chosen. But let's get some final thoughts from Shona Craven and Katrina Stewart. You both seem to be agreed that John Swinney will probably be the next leader, if indeed he does stand. I wonder, Katrina, have the last day's events signified just a changing of the guard, or do you see the SNP, the Scottish Government, going in a different direction?
I mean, John Swinney is going to be plagued with the same kind of continuity candidate narratives that Humza Yousaf was, but I do think that he needs to shift things in a different direction. He'll still have some of the really problematic hangovers from the last administration to deal with. The misogyny bill is going to cause a lot of ructions, I think, and he will have to navigate a way through that sort of legislation. But I think he needs to focus on the everyday issues that are really important to Scottish voters. And it will be really interesting to see how he interacts with the other parties, if indeed we are correct and he is next in the post. Labour is sort of talking about being battle ready and wanting an election, but I think they need to really be careful what they wish for, because there was quite a good dynamic between Anna Sarwar and Humza Yousaf, and Anna Sarwar was quite good at getting one over on Humza Yousaf. Whether he's going to be able to do that with John Swinney is another matter. So there's a lot of moving parts, and it's going to be really interesting.
Shona, he might be able to unite the party, but it doesn't take away from the fact he's leading a minority government. Do you think it's going to be difficult for him?
I think it was interesting to see Patrick Harvey's sort of tone in the clip earlier. He did seem quite, I don't know, maybe a little bit regretful. He was talking about how angry he was last week, as if almost to suggest that he'd calmed down now and oops, what have I done? And I do think there are important issues that need to be addressed very firmly with the Greens. The cash review and the response to the cash review regarding gender issues involving children, that is very important, and the line that the Greens were taking was very troubling, and that will have implications for the conversion therapy legislation that's going through Holyrood. These are really serious issues, and I think we're sometimes in danger of just calling it all that gender stuff. This is about children and young people and protecting them from harm. So I don't think the Greens can get away with just pretending, oh, we're really progressive and everyone who's against us is a baddie. That is a really important issue, and I think John Swinney will take a very responsible view to telling the Greens you have to respect scientific evidence, and child protection matters to us as a party.
I wonder, Katrina, is the problem actually more who comes after John Swinney? Because you get the impression he was quite reluctant about putting his name forward. He's got his family to think about. He's in his 60s. Now, by American standards, that's no age, but you can imagine that, you know, if he commits to this, doesn't he have to commit to fighting the next Scottish elections and then going beyond that? I mean, that's quite a lot to take on, isn't it?
This is a bit of a sticking point for him in that he has previously made it clear that he wants to step back from frontline politics, and he's been saying today that he's been having messages from colleagues who are trying to push him down this route. If he's going to do it, he's going to have to not just embrace it behind the scenes, but embrace it publicly, because he is going to have a tough job to do, and there's been talk of him being a caretaker First Minister, and I really hope that we reject that, because this is a serious job. There is a long run up until the Holyrood elections. We can't have someone just sort of sitting on the throne for the next 2 years, not achieving anything and just kind of ticking things over. There needs to be progress for the Parliament, and as Shona says, there are some very, very serious and contentious issues that need proper consideration and a way through them.
Of course, we are talking as if John Swinney has not only put his name forward, but has actually won the leadership, or
Indeed,
is,
yes.
is standing uncontested. I wonder if Kate Forbes were to stand, how would you rate her chances?
It's quite difficult because you're talking about party unity within the group at Holyrood. You're talking about what the SNP voters want. Their priority is always independence and rather than continuity at this point. But you do have this question of getting enough support. You have parties that aren't necessarily going to say, Kate Forbes is First Minister, we're going to vote against the SNP every time. You know, Megan Gallagher was saying earlier, if we agree with something and we think it's in the best interest of Scotland, we're not going to set our face against it. So we'll see. I don't personally think John Swinney will be the First Minister going into the Holyrood election.
OK, right. Well, remember those predictions and get back to you. That is it for tonight on another momentous day in Scottish politics. Laura is back tomorrow from me. Have a good night. Bye-bye for now.